So welcome back to 3rd Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and this one is another one that was given to me by Filler, who previously gave me a map that I'd never showcased before. Now this one I have, albeit quite a while ago. It's one of the maps that was released, I believe, as part of a tournament that was ongoing at the time. There are two settlements on both sides of the map, and that will play into things here, because as I'm sure you can see from the title of the video, based on what he has told me, this is one that begins as a pitch battle but ends up becoming a siege battle, and I'm not entirely sure which way around it's going to be, but you would assume that one side or the other is going to be fairly dominant out on the open field, and the other side will have to retreat back to their settlement to try and recoup their losses. Based on the positionings of the army, you could assume perhaps that the red team will be the ones that will get forced back, but maybe not. This is a long battle after all, so I imagine there is going to be a fairly lengthy cut, at least initially, and they will meet out in these more open grounds over here, but it's going to be quite interesting, this, because it depends on whether or not, this will really be the ultimate litmus test, I suppose, of if you can dig yourselves out of a really bad situation, even in a pitch battle, by taking up a superior defensive position and allowing the enemy to break upon you. Whether that ends up being the blue team or the red team is kind of irrelevant, really. This is a situation which we don't see crop up quite so overtly. I mean, it is something you see in pitch battles and certainly in free-for-alls as the battle wears on to lesser extents, but rarely do you have the option of turning the battle into a siege partway through if things aren't going quite as well as you envisioned. Either way, we will be going through the army compositions first and foremost. It's going to be a Numenorian and Elf alliance on the blue team, with Rogue Buzzard here playing as Numenor. Numenor obviously going to be very good when it comes to being aggressive in these situations. The steel bows don't have the most amount of ammunition, but they are going to be fantastic elite unit hunters at long range. They can muck in as makeshift infantry when they're out of ammunition as well, but this certainly isn't where they're at their most efficient, especially considering they are quite an expensive unit for the small amount of ammunition that they do provide. Meanwhile, further down the line, we are also going to see something a little bit different as well. This is something a little bit odd. I assume that all eras were turned on, because under normal circumstances, of course, Numenor don't have access to the Temple Guard. The Temple Guard are usually the preserve of Mordor alone, but the brass armoured variant does exist within the game as a Numenor option, but you have to select the eras to all rather than just early. It's one of those things that is maybe a little bit hidden in the game, and you have to sort of find it for yourself, I suppose. But the Temple Guard, of course, do not have the ammunition constraints that the regular steel bowmen do, so this gives Numenor even more armour-piercing punch at long range. It's certainly the sort of thing the red team should be quite worried about. It's the sort of thing Numenor, of course, don't normally have access to, after all. Full line of Numenorian cohort in the front with some Numenorian shield guard in behind. You rarely see one or the other. You, under most circumstances, will see Numenor bring both, because they're both very, very good frontline combatants, with the Numenorian cohort being a little bit better at dealing damage to regular targets, with the shield guard being a little bit more resilient, and also with that armour piercing as well, a little bit of extra mass that spearmen give also, but they cover for one another very well, and it makes Numenor very difficult to wear down from the front. There are factions which can do it, but they're few and far between, and even they are going to take a bit of a beating at the hands of Numenor's abilities here. Going to be backed up by a few units of Belagaya pikemen as well, just in case they do need that long-range melee anchor. Not going to be quite as strong as the Naru Sentinels, of course, but they don't necessarily need to be. Pikes can be perfectly efficient in their regular guise. We have some seafarers as well. Only the one unit under normal circumstances. I think you see Numenor bring far more of the seafarers than you see them bring here, but either way, another unit to help support the front line with armour-piercing damage. Pharazim Swordmasters, the 3 HP monsters, very, very difficult. I mean, we haven't run the shock infantry tourney yet, but based on the results of the shielded infantry one, which we had fairly recently, I certainly wouldn't change my mind in thinking that the Pharazim Swordmasters should be the strongest such unit in the game. That third hit point is such a difference maker after all, and against unarmoured targets they're utterly imperious, and even against armoured ones, to be fair, their base damage is high enough to still be a real problem. And the other unit, which Numenor don't normally have access to, it's usually an Umbar exclusive, is the Alcarondas Faithful, although on this occasion I don't actually think the Alcarondas Faithful are offering anything that the Pharazim nobles wouldn't, so I think it's kind of a moot point them being here, to be honest. I mean, the Temple Guard offers something to Numenor which they don't normally have, a very strong melee combatant combined with armour-piercing archer that has a bunch of ammunition that their regular ones don't. Alcarondas Faithful, though, I think they are slightly better in prolonged melee than the Pharazim nobles, but they're not as good at charging into infantry, but these are very small margins when you're talking about sword cavalry after all. Now then, the player who sent me the battle replay, Filler himself, is going to be playing as the Elven contingent of this blue team. Some Woodland Realm Axemen hidden, Woodland Realm Spears of Emerald, I should say, also hidden, so perhaps hoping for a more direct conflict on the open field initially, trying to use his units in ambush stance, essentially. But the red team are going to make him wait for that, if indeed they allow him to engage in it at all. A few units of Hiriek and Hiri Lung, so obviously the defensive and heavily shielded Spearmen, which offers Mirkwood probably the best front line at dealing with that sort of warfare, and then obviously the Hiri Lung, which are far more aggressive, a little bit vulnerable perhaps to missiles, but once they get into melee, any heavy Elven swordsman is going to be very effective against a lot of infantry targets. Got some Ents back here as well. Obviously the Trolls, we all know what they're about. The Ents, very much the same sort of thing in Reforged. They're not Elephant class units like they are over in Silmarillion, which means their strengths and weaknesses line up perfectly really with the Trolls. Anything that's good against heavy infantry, sort of axemen and the like, as you might expect against Ents, are going to be good. But against stuff like spears and pikes, they can be really, really dominant, and it's all about timing as to when you commit them. Elders of the Elven King, of course, Mirkwood can bring a lot of strong archers to the field, and the Silverthorn arrows of the Elders, one such thing, and obviously very good in melee as well with their two-handed sword. Wardens of Amon Lank have got a two-handed axe in melee. They're not multiple HP, but even still they can hide anywhere. Greenwood Watchers have got their throwing projectiles. Assassin class units like this are kind of hard to use, but we'll have to wait and see how well they can do. I'm not a huge fan of the Huntsman of Amon Lank, in the same way that I'm not a huge fan of any single HP cavalry in the game as it stands, to be fair. However, we have seen single HP cavalry used quite effectively of late, but the Huntsman of Amon Lank really double down on that fragility because they don't have the most armour like most Mirkwood units, and they're single HP, and they don't have a shield, so really anything that can do damage to them is going to do so at a fairly heightened rate. But we'll see. I mean, if you can keep them moving, they can still be effective. 2 more units of Watchers, a couple of units of Woodland Realm Patrol here, but the stakes kind of give away their position, so that's something to be considered. A couple of units of Bows of Emerald as well, so plenty of cavalry. No Sindar of the Girdle though. Interesting army that, but then rarely do we get to see Mirkwood actually out on the open field like this, so this is a composition with a field battle maybe more in mind, but as I already mentioned, we may be seeing a siege component to this as well. Over on the other side we do have the Dwarves and Dorwinion, so maybe 2 of the factions which are more well known perhaps for accruing wealth. Maybe they're not too keen on sharing with their newfound invaders. Erebor, Ironfoot Wargoats, I mean, the Alcarondas Faithful are looking to be the dominant singular unit of cavalry on the field. Everything else so far has only been single HP, but in much the same way as the Huntsmen that we've seen, the Wargoats can be very effective if you can keep them charging, but they do suffer from that single HP a little bit. But they are at least more well armoured than the Mirkwood equivalent on the other side of the field. As for the true event, or the main event I should say, for the Erebor army, it's always going to be the infantry, of course. Several units of unupgraded Ironfoot warriors, but they'll still be efficient enough. I mean, against high quality like Mirkwood and Numenor, going for numbers like this can actually be a little bit more of a risk. I mean, they're going to struggle a little bit against those Numenorians on the front line, but they are perfectly effective at what they do, and they do give the Dwarves obviously those numbers that may be very important. A couple of units of Axguard flanking the Sons of Durin, so this is where, especially against Numenor, Erebor can be effective. That's a lot of armour piercing which is going to be sent out onto the field, and it's the sort of thing Numenor won't particularly enjoy being in melee against, nor will they enjoy having to deal with all of these crossbows. I think that's 4 units of crossbows, which may be a little bit overkill, but if they can get into the right position, either in the canyons just in front of them, or of course digging into the settlement, it's the sort of thing that Yabu over here is going to be very grateful for. But we'll have to wait and see. I mean, it's again another unorthodox army, this, especially when you consider there's another unit of cavalry with the Ironfoot Hammer Guard as well. So crossbows, high investment, shock infantry, plenty of regular infantry. I mean, there's not a lot of variety in it, but if it can be deployed effectively in one big block, then who knows, it could be the sort of thing which is effective. And then I guess de facto fighting on home turf here today is going to be a big B65445, who's playing as a Dorwinion, as I've already mentioned. Morroquendi bows, I mean, they're going to be quite similar in terms of the Elven contingents, the Mirkwood elves across the field, to be fair, in the sense that perfectly capable of dealing damage, a little bit fragile with their own armour values, but very damaging at range and in melee. Of course, the Morroquendi can always count on the Elvelin to be a little bit more solid with regards to armour value, so plenty of marksmen, got some Nandor Glade Riders, some more cavalry as well. Elven Vanguard, looking like they're going for more of a rank and file infantry approach here, the red team, which is going to make them more numerous but also more basic in terms of what they offer in that regard. Elvelyn and Ironfoots are all well and good, and they will get the job done generally, but if they're not careful, depending on the shape of the engagement, the lack of quality could be a bit of a problem. Hoping to redeem themselves from their recent poor showing in the knockout tourney for shielded infantry will be the Elvelyn Hammerguard, and they will have the opportunity to do so against the Numenorians, but less so, I would say, against the Mirkwood Elves. Plenty of Morroquendi pikes as well, which will be very important for holding back the high quality of the infantry that's going to be coming their way. And there's some Elvelyn infantry here also. I would not be surprised to see some Dorwinion units also emerge from being hidden as well. I mean, I'm actually surprised that more of these units aren't hidden, to be honest, but stuff like Keldon River Patrol will probably be popping in out of nowhere as well. But there will be a fairly lengthy cut on this occasion, I think, because both armies are fairly far apart. We will be seeing the pitch components to this battle first, I believe, and then a siege component following that up in whatever guise that may take. We shall have to wait and see. But I will rejoin when the armies are about to clash. So the first engagement in this battle is going to be a little bit of a peripheral one, really, because we're going to be seeing the bows of EMYN trying to skirmish down the Ironfoot wall goats, and they were having a good deal of success at actually doing that, but unfortunately for them, they have been caught in melee, which is really not where the bows of EMYN want to be against really any sort of heavy-duty cavalry, really, which the Ironfoot wall goats, in spite of their single HP nature, do count as. The problem with the Ironfoot wall goats, though, is that they are unshielded, so in spite of the fact they do benefit from that dwarven heavy armour, they're still not really ideal when it comes to mitigating skirmish damage. I have to say, I thought we would be seeing more of an open field affair right from the start here, but it does appear like this is going to be more of a traditional siege than anything else, if I'm being perfectly honest. I mean, it's not really terribly sporting of the Dorwinion and Erebor players to set themselves up in such a fashion, but if they do intend to maybe try and whittle the enemy down with their cavalry and then force them into some disadvantageous engagements in the settlement, then that's fine, I suppose. I mean, it is now incumbent on Mirkwood and Numenor to try and engineer the situation to better fit their goals. We'll be going up to ×2 speed right from the off here, because it is going to be a battle in which we see quite a bit, really, of moving around. There's 3 units of these Nandor Glade Riders as well, which, again, single HP cavalry, very fragile, but they do have the upshot of having as good a charge, really, as some of the higher tier cavalry units in the game. They are pure shot cavalry in that sense, so they do still have their uses, but it is going to be very difficult to utilise them when considering the rather large amount of skirmishers that Mirkwood can bring to the table. Got here though Mr. Big with his archers both on horseback and on the walls here doing their thing. Mirkwood wants, now they start returning fire with their woodland realm patrol, they are going to be able to ward off this little mini assault. They do have plenty of higher tier stuff as well. Warden's Vandal Blank firing away. I mean, not a huge amount of losses inflicted on the Morroquendi bows, to be honest with you, considering several volleys were loosed just there. We of course have the Mirkwood cavalry as well, which is kind of keeping the Nandor Glade Riders in check for the time being, although they are going to start peeling off, I think, taking the long way around. I mean, that is something else to consider. The red team and the green team's cavalry, blue team's cavalry, is going to be a little bit more difficult to use, purely because the battle is going to take on a very siege-like quality right from the start. But even out here, we're not going to be seeing the open parts of the map really utilised, and the canyons instead are where Numenor and Mirkwood are going to set up shop to start with. So it's going to be one of those where more mobile units are going to be difficult to use, but they could end up making the difference. Time and time again recently we've seen defensive cavalry used really rather well. So we'll see if, well, the de facto defenders on this occasion are going to be, of course, the red team, considering that is how they have decided to try and approach matters. Bows of EMYN will be good at dealing with Nandor Glade Riders as well, although they are better equipped to chase down the enemy. Morroquendi Stalkers coming in from the rear, and I mean, going after the Balagai Pikes, that's going to be pretty decent as far as the target goes. And it is really a case of playing whack-a-mole with the enemy cavalry so far. But the blue team, I mean, they may not feel as though they're not the ones dictating this battle to be the way it is. The red team setting up in the fort and using their cavalry in this way are the ones that have set the scene. But I suppose by default, really, from our point of view, we're going to be hoping the blue team are the ones to do something here, because they kind of need to be, to make it an interesting affair. I mean, it's a long battle, but I imagine at the very least the opening stages here are really just the blue team trying to figure out how best to really approach the battle, and how the red team have decided to be rather unsporting about things. I mean, are they going to try and charge in here? They do, but it wasn't one with the lances down, so it isn't ultimately going to be too much of a problem here. The Ironfoot Wargoats may very well rout in the face of the Hiri Lungs base damage that they're capable of dealing. They may return, I'm not sure. Well, they certainly won't with Huntsman of Amallank right there. Ironfoot crossbows. What are they shooting at? They're going after the Huntsman of Amallank. I'm not sure that's actually terribly worthwhile, considering the very defensive formation that the red team have struck up. I don't know if the Huntsman of Amallank will actually be useful, so maybe as a tar pit they will be. They're going to continue to fire away, and we are going to continue to go up to ×6 speed until the blue team decide to move. I mean, I do have some sympathy for them here, but from my point of view I do hope that they move in sooner rather than later. Nandor Glade Riders still moving around in a big blob, which perhaps is proving to be a little bit of a concern. We've still got those Morroquendi Stalkers as well, who I would assume are still trying to go after the Balagaya pikemen, as well they should. Good way of getting their money's worth from them. Temple Guard, I mean, they can't move in with their Lance Cavalry because of the presence of the pikes, and the Temple Guard in behind them would be able to do crippling damage on the approach. Meanwhile, still got these Huntsmen of Amallank who do actually manage to catch some of the Nandor Glade Guard. And with the Bows of Emenduir in close support, this is going to go pretty badly for the Nandor Glade Riders. Off the charge, they're going to do lots of damage to the Huntsmen, but when it comes to being in sustained melee, 1 HP cavalry against 1 HP cavalry, the Huntsmen should have a clear edge here, especially with the support of the Horse Archers in close attendance as well. And you can see how fragile there that the Nandor Glade Riders really were, because they've melted away very quickly, and that means, of course, that the fast-moving contingent has been mopped up by the blue team, which leaves only the fort to try and take. Easier said than done, of course, but still, that is the end of the Dorwinion cavalry force as far as we can tell. They may have sequestered one of the Nandor Glade Riders away separately and hidden them, which of course Dorwinion's cavalry has a tendency to hide anywhere, so that is a possibility. But from the blue team's perspective, I think they will be quite happy with the fact that they've managed to deal with that. There go the Morroquendi Stalkers, that's still something to consider, but 15 Horse Archers aren't really a good enough reason to continue to hold up the assault for too much longer. Ironfoot crossbows getting a little bit closer. It's not really, they can't really go too much further back, if I'm being brutally honest. I mean, they can return fire into Yabu's crossbows, and they are going to retreat back inside the settlement, but to be honest, that's actually a pretty good gambit from the force if they were to keep their crossbows there and just fire volley after volley into this infantry here. I feel as though that is the bait that would be needed to force Mirkwood and Numenor into an assault here. Perhaps I am wrong. Well, this is a little bit more like it now. The battle truly gets underway, it would appear, with Numenor and Mirkwood now taking a far more aggressive stance and putting themselves fully in range of Dorwinion's archers and Erebor's crossbows with the Elven marksmen. I mean, it's more the crossbows that are going to be the real problem here. The stopping power of them are going to be more than capable of doing damage even to the most heavily defensible Numenor units. You can see that there are
armor-piercing arrows coming in, and where they hit they will kill units, but again, based on the relative cost of both of the units, based on the ammunition that the steel bows have, I think that this will be seen as a little bit of a de facto victory for the red team, and they're not actually taking as much damage as you would expect given the actually pretty decent accuracy that the steel bows have shown thus far. Temple Guard, of course, got far more ammunition. But yeah, I mean, this is a lot of armor piercing. The black streaks behind the arrows denoting that. More dwarves do fall. Morroquendi bow is also going to start firing away the different black streaks, the longer ones, denoting the poison projectiles. I think going after the Pharazim Swordmasters, but it'll be a little while before any of them fall with the third hit point that they have. There's so many skirmishes here though from the red team that I still feel as though they will actually be feeling pretty happy about the situation. I mean, when you consider how many skirmishes the red team actually have, it may be within the blue team's best interest to be more aggressive than this, because there's no way from this perspective, when you're looking at things, that the red team can have the wrong end of this skirmish engagement, basically. It's going to be pretty bad for the blue team, even if they use all of their Elven Archers, their armor-piercing archers. It's going to be more cost-effective, this, for the red team. The Elven Marksmen very much in their element in the skirmish fight. The Ironfoot crossbows capable of doing a lot of damage. It's not often you'll see crossbows in a skirmish fight, really, but that is the situation we're in. The hand we have been dealt. And the infantry's moving backwards. I mean, if you were going to move backwards, you never should have moved forward in the first place. And I have to say, it's a bit of a disastrous start to their attack here, the blue team. I have, like I said, sympathy for them, given the way the red team have set themselves up, but there's no need for you to play right into their hands in this way. And you can see here that a lot of these armor-piercing projectiles doing a lot of damage to the Elven Marksmen, but like I said, I don't think the red team will be too concerned that Temple Guard ammunition is being used on a singular unit of Elven Marksmen, which, as it stands, is still just about in the fight. First ranks of those crossbows already. I mean, if you're going to go after something, the Morroquendi bows are more damaging, more useful in melee. Their poison projectiles can yet rout your units, and they're going after the right things as well, the red team here. With archers that are not under direct pressure, they're going after stuff like Balagai pikemen, chipping away at the infantry power that their opponent has. Still that unit of Alcarondas Faithful, which of course in the confines of the settlement don't necessarily know how useful they are going to be. And the Elven Archers here. Ardenheim's Shadow Bow is being committed forward as well. I mean, you can tell, I think, that, I mean, filler we've seen on several occasions before, but I think you can tell that there's definitely some new blood going on here. Committing forward Ardenheim Shadow Bows in such a fashion. They would be a real ace in the hole to have later on for the de facto attackers in this situation. It's going to be a little while, I think, before we start to see. Maybe this is it's going to start as a siege and end as a pitch battle. Maybe what the red team are going to do, I would hope they're going to do, although I have my doubts. Players rarely do this. Start off hyper defensively and then switch to being very, very aggressive. I'm a little bit surprised at filler as well. We're sending a single unit of Woodland Round Patrol in here. I mean, the best you can hope for is a swift death. I think he was trying to go after the crossbows and ward them off, and he has succeeded in that. You can see there is examples of this front line being damaged fairly heavily as well by the blue team. So it's not just the blue team's infantry which is looking a little bit haggard. There's a lot of casualties they've taken though by being in full view of the defending archers. I mean, I suppose the upshot of this is both sides are sort of running their ammunition supply dry. So, once again, all quiet on the western front. This is a very odd battle. I mean, given Filler's description of it, I was always expecting something a little bit unorthodox, but this is simultaneously more typical than what I was expecting and less typical. It's a very strange one, this. Perhaps a little bit more akin to what warfare was really like. Lots of hitting each other with projectiles randomly, and then a lot of waiting around. Ironfoot crossbows moving forward, so still perhaps a little bit more damage to be done. the enemy move forward. Yeah, now Elven Marksman continuing to fire away. I mean, we're starting to get to the point in the battle where, based on the frames that are left and the units that are left, we should be seeing a large-scale melee engagement as well, and not just the continued poking with skirmishers. That's the Elven Marksman continuing to go after individual targets, but still, I mean, I can see what the blue team have been trying to do pretty much at every turn, but it's not been executed particularly well. And I wouldn't have agreed with the overall idea behind what they've been doing anyway. Again, this is where a bit of artillery would come in extremely handy. Engage aggressively, also take advantage of all of your possible avenues of attack. This one, as well as the two ones at the front. Having to go into siege mentality here with equal resources can be a little bit concerning. But it is what it is. I don't know if I'm actually going to be able to use the naming convention for this that I was going to, which is Siege/Pitch Battle on the YouTube title. I think I'm just going to have to classify this as what it basically is, which is just a straight up siege battle. A 2v2 siege with equal resources, which is a little bit of a strange one. I mean, the blue team from here I think will be doing very well to win. If the red team can continue to use their skirmishers nicely, and they are going after, again, another fairly vulnerable target here, so they're going after stuff which is going to die pretty quickly at the hands of archers. Ironfoot crossbows plugging away at the Hiri Ek, looking like we do have a melee engagement at long last. Mirkwood testing the mettle of these dwarven Ironfoot warriors, and with the numbers being what they are, Mirkwood should win. I mean, we saw in the army composition phase lots of this very rank and file approach to Erebor's army with lots of Ironfoot, so being outnumbered shouldn't really be a problem they encounter like this. Oh well. Valin Vinegard and Morroquendi pikes could move in. The long houses as well nearby. Interesting to see a little bit of Northman architecture in here, alongside the sort of standard medieval 2 stuff that we see. Balagai pikemen moving forward, but alone they're going to get ripped apart, really. What have we got going on here? I mean, lots of damage has been done here. I think a combination of all of Mirkwood's cavalry has been causing this, but lots of dead Ironfoot warriors, not so much Hammer Guard, so now sort of in support of their infantry, the Hammer Guard going to prevent any more hammer, well, not so much hammer and anvil, but cycle charging. Numenorian steel bows could move in. Still, this battle continues to be a little bit bizarre, and again, this is the sort of committal of units that I always disagree with, because you're sending a unit that could be otherwise fairly useful to die for no good reason. Balagai pikemen on the front line. It's not even as if the pikes will be able to hold all of these units at arm's length, because there are Morroquendi pikes in here, which, when fully healthy, of course, are stronger. And the Balagai pikes already were a little bit depleted, so I'm not entirely sure what Rogue Buzzard was thinking there, but whatever it was not a good idea. Realm Axeman now moving forward. Pushing through that one unit of Ironfoot warriors, so this is a glimmer of hope for the blue team. Mirkwood does have a little bit of momentum as they push into the secondary defensive line made up of Dorwinion's units, but this one would be a little bit more difficult to deal with. Pike support, more armoured spears, and Erebor also paying a little bit more attention. They are going to reinforce their Dorwinion allies' front line with Axe Guard of Erebor, so a damaging unit of infantry. The armour piercing, not so useful against Mirkwood, but that's not as important as it could otherwise be here. So that's going to be where Mirkwood do come unstuck unless more elite units can be committed. Greenwood Watchers there. Still Ironfoot crossbows, but yeah, this is... I'm surprised actually the Balagai pikemen haven't routed already, so morale-wise they've proven to be made of slightly sterner stuff than maybe I was going to initially give them credit for. There we are. What's going on down here? Huntsman of Anon Lank getting involved once again. The Ironfoot Hammer Guard actually pulling back, and another charge coming in. Javelins now being loosed. Seafarers of Niendamos, not as big of a presence from a Numenor army as we're used to seeing, but they're still here. A few volleys from those javies on the Ironfoots will help out matters. Temple Guard also in here as well, but Sons of Durin will make a big difference here. One of the scarier armor-piercing bodyguard units the game has to offer, and not many of, well, none of these Numenor units are really going to enjoy being in melee with them. Not even the Temple Guard are going to relish the opportunity to cross blades with them. So Numenor taking more responsibility for this front line. Mirkwood going to the other side, and I mean, this is more of a token effort, I think, over here. Just want to keep this assault going, keep some defensive units over here. I mean, that is a good mindset to have as attackers. If you can't fully commit on all front lines, you should at least have a token force on some, so that the defenders still have to watch over it, lest you just walk into their territory. And we've got here then Greenwood Watchers, who have already taken a little bit of damage at the hands of the Morroquendi bows up on the wall. And now those throwing projectiles being used to good effect. Actually, those Morroquendi pikes sticking out would also be another good target, but this isn't going to end well for Mirkwood unless they get some more heavy-duty reinforcements over here. Like I said, Dorwinion will be very comfortable on the front line with those Morroquendi pikes. I mean, Mirkwood don't have a phalanx unit, which is one of the ways in which, in this kind of warfare, they do come unstuck, so those Morroquendi pikes will be a concern for them. Greenwood Watchers maybe in some slightly depleted Hiri line. You have to say, actually, Mirkwood a little bit more spread out. I'm not entirely certain that's a good idea at this point. Mirkwood already having lost half of their forces, but you never know. The defenders could yet come unstuck. Nandor Glade Guard moving in to help support this front line as well. Numenorian cohort on the way. I mean, the attackers really don't have too much of a choice other than to continue to commit stuff to the front line and hope that their quality can see them over the edge, but I don't know. I mean, it's been a battle with a feeling of slow but inevitable defeat for the attackers so far. Or I suppose I should continue to call them the blue team, really, because this isn't set up as a siege would be. Under normal circumstances, we see the attackers have all the advantages, but on this occasion it's most certainly the defenders. Valen Vinegard now pushing forward a little bit more. Greenwood Watchers, I suppose, trying to use their throwing knives to soften this front line up, but very quickly the dwarves have engaged them in melee. Further back, some Alcarondas Faithful could still be used. Wardens of Amon-Lank, what are they going after? Setting themselves up and shooting their projectiles in. Going after the Morroquendi pikes, already a little bit depleted, but the right thing to go after nonetheless from Mirkwood's perspective. Nothing will get in their way quite so much. Valen Marksman, I think, firing at the ends, which is questionable, but it's better than firing at nothing. Well, there are some Hiriak on the front line now as well, but nowhere near enough. I don't think this is going to end well for Mirkwood, as I keep saying, but Greenwood Watchers, they can hit the sides of this front line, and it is doing some damage, but maybe not at the rate that's going to be required as this battle wears on. Looking around patrol, getting into melee. I mean, it's better than nothing, but out of ammo skirmishers aren't really what you need when you're facing off against elven pikes and dwarven infantry, including axemen, of course. Over yonder, maybe this does represent a slightly better opportunity. Ironfoot crossbows trying to wrap around the front line. I mean, they, as out of ammo skirmishers, are going to struggle mightily against stuff like Shield Guard, and obviously the Seafarers and Niendamos are a little bit more well equipped as skirmishers in melee. Huntsmen of Amon-Lank still doing their thing. So far, the Mirkwood cavalry has been used pretty well, and those Ironfoot crossbows will not hold up well under continuous charging. They may actually rout as a result of just being in pure melee with all of that at this point. Defeat now seems certain for the dwarves. No more reinforcements are forthcoming, and the Numenor infantry is starting to have the desired effect. Reinforcements were needed a little bit sooner, and perhaps not enough in the way of reinforcements as in this part of the settlement. Relying on the quality of the Sons of Durin alone, and that's not going to be enough here, as Numenor well and truly have claimed momentum in this fight. Pharazim Swordmasters could come forward as well. Can they carry that throughout the rest of the settlement? I mean, we'll be moving into the final 10k frames. The de facto end of the battle, as it were. There go the Ironfoot crossbows, so we'll keep a weathered eye on that. The Ents are moving in, but I don't think this is going to be a great fight for the Ents. I mean, actually, it's just Morroquendi bows. I thought they would handle Glade Guard in there for a second then, but no. Morroquendi bows still a little bit more capable of looking after themselves against the Ents than regular archers would be, but it's still not going to be great for them. The Ents and the Warns of Amelmank actually doing a lot of damage here. And now we're starting to see the blue team crank up the pressure a little bit. I would be rooting for the blue team here, in spite of some of the missteps they've made, just the way that the red team have approached the battle generally in a 2v2. Also the fact that I was told it would be a siege pitch battle kind of hybrid, and that hasn't proved to be the case because of how hyper-defensive the red team have been. Ironfoots, Morroquendi bows are there. What have we back here? Elvalin marksmen taking hits from the Elders of the Elven King, still very much alive. Still the Elvalin infantry that have been added to the front line, making sure that the red team is still winning this fight over here, but it's a more closely contested fight. Uriak. Elvalin marksmen heading to the front line as well. Numenorian cohorts, see Pharazim Damos, there's the Pharazim Swordmasters as well. Projectiles being utilised now. Ironfoot Hammerguard is still waiting. I'm surprised actually there's still a unit of crossbows that has ammunition left to them. I suppose back here is this I guess is the final stand, because it's one straight shot to the end, but I don't think there's going to be any need really for that. You can see they're starting to try and pull some units off the front line at this point. Still 2 units of crossbows. It goes to show how many crossbows the dwarves brought, I suppose. That proved to be a very good decision in the long run. The defenders once again claiming the momentum over here. X-Guard of Erebor, of course, going to be very good against monstrous infantry like Ents, and there's simply not enough Warns of Amelmank for them to keep this attack going. So there it is. They are going to collapse in this regard, but still Elvalin Hammerguard. Still the decisive actions in this battle, you have to say, probably yet to be taken. Mirkwood still struggling to hack and slash their way through the sheer amount of units Dorwinion still have on the front line. And those reinforcements being siphoned off perhaps as a result of Numenor's progress. Dorwinion going to try and help out against them. Here we do have some Blade Guard and some Elvalin infantry blocking Numenor's path, but with Pharazim Swordmasters and Temple Guard on the front line. This is going to be little more than a speed bump for the Numenorians once again, I fear. But crossbows shuffling around. Defeat seems certain. Only a military genius could win this battle. Is that correct? Still more shield guard to be committed. That armor piercing could be useful. Do not have much else. I mean, they still have Alcarondas Faithful, but I mean, both armies have got units of cavalry, which could be really useful, but they could also just cancel one another out, and that's the issue here. Whoever ends up losing this fight, well, you can tell they're going to start to lose towards the late game. They will need to use their cavalry aggressively and to good effect, and the other team can then use their cavalry simply as a blocker. And the Elves of the Elven King are going to be shooting into the side of this formation. One unit of Mirkwood spears holding back this kind of mini counter-attack. I don't know whether to call it that. I don't know whether to say that the red team have taken any aggressive actions in this battle, but it is what it is. Certainly newer players will have a tendency to be much more defensive than more experienced ones, so to a certain extent it's a little predictable perhaps. Bows of EMYN, we are going to start charging in here to exposed units, doing what they can. Mirkwood have made good use of their cavalry in all fairness, considering the kind of battlefield it is does not lend itself well to horse archers and lance cavalry. The early game cavalry versus cavalry stuff might top, but they've even been used well here in the settlement. Numenor continuing to make gains in the right direction. More friendly bows being committed to the front line, but again, this is there's more an effort still to just slow Numenor down than outright stop them. Yes. Bows moving backwards. Ironfoot Hammer Guard. Elven infantry are here. But now, still here I should say. But now defeat does seem certain for them. Maybe the more direct influence of the Elders of the Elven King is starting to bite on Dorwinion. And Mirkwood just throwing everything they have left in melee to try and continue to make sure that is the case. More Erebor units on their way over. Interesting that Erebor are committing reinforcements over here when Numenor is still making such progress. I mean, at this point, the defenders are under pressure from both ends. Still, more friendly units fighting hard. The fact that Numenor still have reinforcements to commit, and the defenders, I mean, I guess they do with the Elven Hammer Guard. And I would commit them sooner rather than later, because that armor piercing would be so handy at cracking through that Numenor plate armor. But so far they seem reticent to do so. Still Malcolm, less faithful, waiting for their opportunity to flood in. Still some spare Dorwinion units as well, so we're getting to the business end of matters now. Out of ammo crossbows can be committed to the front line if need be. The Axe Guard of Erebor have been committed alone so far. Yeah, the Mirkwood Pike should definitely be the target here. And then when all is said and done, the Elders of the Elven King will be very, very handy for the blue team to utilise in melee. And the Watchers are there. I mean, there's some very depleted units, but other than that, nothing else really. We're getting to the point in the battle where really everything has been committed. Yeah, maybe a bit of surrounding action from Dorwinion is the answer to the Mirkwood pressure. They can't really do so against Numenor, because to do so would alert the cavalry immediately and they get charged into oblivion. The Hammer Guard did get committed, and now they're getting pulled off the front line for reasons I'm not entirely sure of. There's no purpose behind saving an individual bodyguard unit for the late game. Another classic mistake that newer players, well, not even just newer players make that mistake, to be honest, but it's more brazenly made by newer players, as will be the case here. I really don't see the point. I mean, if they're trying to cycle charge in and out, that's something, I suppose, but I really don't think that the losses you incur when you try to peel your infantry off the enemy is all that worth dealing with. You can't really charge in too effectively anyway with this boulder. Yeah, they are. They're trying to cycle charge with infantry, which is something, I guess, but I've very rarely seen this work. I mean, some more experienced players will also do this, and I've always thought that the damage you take when you try and get your infantry out of melee with other infantry just makes cycle charging with like heavy axemen and high charge bonus infantry really not worth it at all. But it's an attempt, I suppose. I mean, might be doing Dorwinion a little bit of a favour perhaps by forcing the matter somewhat, with the Numenorean Shield Guard coming in to engage the Hammer Guard just in time. Hammer Guard, of course, in the recent knockout tourney, not doing too well at all, getting eliminated in round 1 by the Goblin King's bodyguard. As impressive as they look, and I thought they would do far better in that. They are perhaps a more specialised infantry unit than I was anticipating from that. Crossbows still doing their thing. Hammer Guard maybe going to try and do something as well. I mean, they really should be trying to cycle around here with their Hammer Guard and maybe go after Mirkwood because of how depleted they really are. It would finish them off more quickly, certainly. There is a certain inevitability to Mirkwood's fate here, though. they still have ammunition with their archers here, they should be using them. A little bit surprised here. Filler by far the most experienced player on the field after all, as has already been mentioned. But yeah, the Mirkwood army here collapsing in the face of all this pressure. They haven't really been able to utilise the entire unit all at once from this position. It's only been the odd shot here and there, which has certainly been helping Mirkwood, but not enough clearly for them to win over here. Mirkwood very much just going to be trying to tie up as much resources as they can with their Numenor allies to try and go on to win the battle. As much damage as they can do with the Elders of the Elven King from this point on as well will be very much appreciated by their ally, I'm sure. Meanwhile, over yonder, Dorwinion are falling apart here. Alcarondas faithful ready, just in case the Hammer Guard decide to move forward. Those crossbows are going to be trying to do as much damage as they can. I'd be surprised if Numenor didn't send a unit of infantry off to deal with them post-haste. Defeat is almost a certainty. Balance of forces is evenly matched. Victory seems certain for the Hammer Guard. That's somewhat surprising. Again, this is all going to come down to experience, I think. Rogue Buzzard should be enveloping the Shield Guard and sending one unit of infantry off to deal with those crossbows, but dragging his heels a little bit. Also, the crossbows trying to go after the Alcarondas Faithful, which is an interesting choice. I mean, I don't want to be too harsh on newer players, but, I mean, considering the way this battle has gone, it may very well turn out to be quite a close one, but it'll be close by our normal battle standards, all the wrong reasons, as it were. Victory seems certain, only a fool could lose this battle. Is that correct? Further afield, still have iron crossbows. As they scurry away. Axe Guard of Erebor. Again, should be trying to envelop the Elders of the Elven King here. If they don't, if they allow them to fight 1v1 from now until the end of the battle, the Elders will rack up a very big kill count. Alcarondas Faithful, the Numenor general, perishing. The Hammer Guard doing very well here against the Alcarondas Faithful, but I don't know whether that was because the Hammer Guard got a nice charge off or what. I mean, the Hammer Guard are a very scary unit with that armour piercing, but the Alcarondas Faithful kind of disgracing themselves as melee cavalry here. Perishing in droves. Further in, Numenor still making a bit of a meal of things, to be honest. Microing your cavalry or not, this is not going too well for them so far. Again, 19 crossbows shouldn't be allowed to. We saw it in the last battle on Versagath where 2 Javelin men were able to do this, but this is going to be a little bit more crippling, I think, for Numenor. They're just sort of stood here, they're not moving their units, they're just hoping that Brownian motion, I guess, will handle things for them, which you should never be relying on Medieval 2 for such things. And now some Alvalin marksmen coming in here to try and lend a hand. More units for Numenor to have to try and deal with. More time for the crossbows, and given Mirkwood's fate is somewhat predictable at this point, I mean, I don't know, the Elders of the Elven King, they'll be able to hack and slash their way through Ironfoot crossbows very easily. I don't know what happens to those Axe Guard of Erebor. I don't know what on earth they're doing. Trying to, I mean, what, are they getting kited? No, surely not, there's nothing out here. I don't think I could be overtly complimentary about any player in this battle, if I'm being honest. A very bizarre affair indeed. Well, the Axe Guard of Erebor waddling their way forwards once again. And over yonder, what do we have? Victory is a distinct possibility. Numenorians finally, as a result really of Dorwinion actually having to move forward and engage them. But I guess they had to at some point, but still. It needn't have come to this for Numenor. And we may still be seeing a blue team victory, which morally probably still is the correct thing to see in this situation, in spite of the very bizarre ways in which this battle has been approached. We are looking at 92 to 92, but it's not taking into account routing units, which God knows what the routing unit situation is going to be like, as we're very much into the end game at this point. Still the Elders of the Elven King, with the Ironfoot crossbows already having taken critical losses before the Axe Guard return. The superior numbers, when I say that, the superior numbers may or may not have been enough, but the Elders of the Elven King are running away again. Another absolutely bemusing choice. I do not know. I do not know what else to say about this battle. It has been truly weird. Finally the Shield Guard are moving in to try and close the jaws on the Hammer Guard, which should have happened far sooner, but they are now doing so. And I think with all of these Numenor units, to be honest, with 28 Pharazim Swordmasters, the blue team are going to be victorious in this battle. But like I said, it's been a battle where no player has truly covered themselves in glory, but part of that can be put down to how strange the battle was. It's not your typical setup for a battle, especially not for newer players either. It was kind of a typical siege, but then it kind of wasn't, both by intention and just, I guess, how the battle has panned out. What's going on over here? There's still 15 Hammer Guard, which again, if they were being used properly, they could really charge into Numenor and do a lot of damage really very quickly. Elders of the Elven King are finally going over here to deal with the Ironfoot crossbows, which it's kind of unfortunate that it took Mirkwood coming over here to deal with this unit of crossbows, which all it took was touching them in melee, and Numenor has allowed them to rack up a far greater kill count than they would otherwise have had. In come the Hammer Guard, they'll do a lot of damage here to the Pharazim Swordmasters. They stay in melee with Numenorian spears though, they are going to, I'd say, live to regret it, but they won't live at all. A few seafarers left alive as well. Elders of the Elven King will sit and wait. I think we might be seeing admissions of defeat rather than a scouring of the battlefield on the whole, because this battle is basically over at this point. The Hammer Guard, as soon as they perish, which will be right there, and that means Dorwinion are going to be the only ones left. Yabu admits defeat. Dorwinion will almost certainly do the same, so let's just go up to times 6 speed. What a strange fight indeed. Are we going to see the endgame splash screen or no? No. Even here, the battle is weird in the wrong kind of way, I suppose. And that's the only thing I can really say about this battle I haven't said as it was wearing on. Bizarre. I don't know how critical I can really be, because most aspects of this battle and how the players played it I could be critical of if I were feeling particularly vindictive, but I'm not. So I've already mentioned all that really needs to be mentioned here. I'm a little bit let down, honestly, that this fight wasn't the pitch/siege battle that was kind of advertised. This was more just a sort of siege, like a pure siege, and yeah, it's a little bit unfortunate. Like that was the reason why of all the fillers battles I picked the one that was a new map and the one that I was told was kind of a hybrid battle, but that didn't actually turn out to be the case in the end, which is a little bit of a shame. I mean, this battle will still see the light of day on the channel because it's worth, as a case study showing for how, I mean, it was a close battle in the end, but also worth showing as a case study for how not to conduct business, I suppose, on the battlefield. But there it is. Very weird for all the reasons that I said. And yeah, I'm not gonna pick out people individually for who play particularly badly. I can't really pick out an MVP either for opposite reasons, but yeah, it is what it is. Either way, big thank you to Philip for sending me the battle. I mean, it was still worth showing. Maybe not for the reasons that I was initially hoping for, but it is still worth showing nonetheless. And a big thank you to all the players as well. Hopefully, I've tried not to be overtly mean to new players, considering that everyone has to start somewhere and you have to learn how to play, especially Reforged with its own specific metas that have cropped up over time. But yeah, it is what it is ultimately. But still, congratulations to the blue team managing to grind out the victory here in the end. And yes, as for what's coming out soon, I already mentioned it in the last battle replay that was on Bersergath, but there will be a few more replays coming out. I do still have... I've got a couple of sieges in Reforged that I still want to do. One that was sent to me by Winged Swordsman. I don't actually know what map it's on because the replay file doesn't make that immediately apparent, but hopefully it's on an interesting one, a big scale 5v3 once again. I do have another large scale siege as well, which I've had for quite a while, honestly, on Austin Airy. But obviously it was sent to me not long after I'd already utilised that map once, but I think enough time has passed, especially considering I'm now working a month in advance, to the point where we could be seeing Austin Airy again, a full Gondorian defence, kind of similar to the Minas Falath battle that we did somewhat recently. We'll see if the Gondorians fare any better in a settlement that's a little bit more advantageous to defend. Also have a battle from the Silmarillion RP as well, between the Elves of Mithrim and the Elves of Gondolin, to follow up really from the Easterlings versus Feanor one that we did previously. So it'll be interesting to see what occurs in that particular siege as well. So we'll be doing that one. I've got a few other Silmarillion ones as well, but they're not part of the RP, so they're sort of reserves, I guess, in case we need content quickly. They will step in to fill the void. But yeah, so we've got certainly 3 replays that are on the approach. Something else which is also going to be fairly soon is the Shock Infantry knockout tourney. We've already done the Lance Cavalry and now Shielded Infantry. Hopefully there won't be as big of a gap between the Shielded Infantry and the Shock Infantry, but it kind of depends on when I can squeeze the necessary recording sessions in, because they're a little bit more demanding than just doing the standard battle replays such as this. So I do need a little bit more time, but perhaps I can do that in a week off that I intend to take in July. Speaking of which, during that week off, whenever the Wednesday falls, that will be when I do my live stream channel update. So I'll be able to really communicate that a little bit closer to the time, but we will be doing the live stream channel update as soon as I'm really able, as soon as I've got a bit of clear space, because I am now much more cognizant of what's going to be happening in the short, medium and long term future. I feel far more confident now that I can actually say what's going to be happening, and it should be good news for the channel as well. I mean, certainly I think 2023 will be a little bit easier on the channel than 2022 has been, and certainly will continue to be over the course of the summer, I'm sure. But irregardless of that, we'll talk about that a little bit closer to the time, I think. Regardless, big thank you to Phila once again and all the players that are part of this battle replay. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.